One, two, one, two. Welcome again to another episode of Sneaks, Rounds, and Life. I'm your host, Lionel McDonald. So, we didn't give you the fifth installment of 22, 23 till infinity. And for those that don't know and haven't watched on either YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music or Google, Sneaks, Rounds, and Life has been around for 2.5 years now. And we have, taken a very special time in hip hop, which is 1993. And it's amazing to believe that it's now 30 years since that groundbreaking year in the game of hip hop. So it's one of those years that really resonates with me. And really, I kind of think back to how formative that year was when it came to my love for hip hop. And what I decided to do, inspired by one of my favorite albums in 1993, which was 93 Till Infinity by Souls of Mischief. So I've taken everyone on a journey over the last several months. We didn't get an episode in May, so this will serve as the May episode of, the 12 favorite or formative albums that I had growing up as a teenager, almost into my 20s. Taking you through some of my favorites. We kind of go back, obviously, Balloon Mind State. I think of No Pressure that we just most recently did, Eric Serm's album. Definitely Black Moon's Into the Stage. So here we are, installment number 5. And we know that I've already got messages from so many people saying, well, how are you going to get the list down to only 12? Because there's so many albums and you're already running out of months. So for those that really know my taste in hip hop, I love groundbreaking stuff. And there's one album that really helped shaped myself and really reflected who I was as a person, and some of the things I was going through at being 19 years old when that album came out. And it's this one. You may hear it lightly in the background. Let me just give it a slight turn up, but it would be Case in Point. So I'm wearing, for those watching on YouTube, and a rainy day here in Toronto, it would be none other than the Hieroglyphics crew, especially Souls of Mischief and their debut album, 93 Till Infinity. So I'm a huge fan of this album. In my eyes, for me, and it's not, everyone has their own taste, but this is probably just misses my top 5 favorite albums. And for those that know me, I rip off my top 5 in no order: Illmatic, The Infamous, Only Built for Cuban Links, and then I have a huge influence with the Tribe Called Quest, and obviously Low End Theory and Midnight Marauders. That would round up the 5, but just missing the 5, obviously, 36 Chambers, and then it would be this album, 93 Till Infinity. So let me tell you a little bit about Souls of Mischief. So Souls of Mischief came up through the Hieroglyphics crew, and both some of the members, and maybe I'll just break the members down. So A plus, Opium, Tajay, Festo D. We just call them Festo. So those are the 4 members. And if I kind of give you some of the history, so A plus and Tajay in East Oakland, California, they went to elementary school. They started rapping at a very early age. Festo kind of came into the mix, I guess around the middle school time, that they definitely hung around a few other people, but most notably Dell, which I only recently learned when I went back and watched the documentary. I guess I had just missed the part for another time, but Dell was actually the cousin of Ice Cube. So there were so many connections to the West and the music there. But Dell, as obviously was a huge influence with the group. And as they, continue to rhyme, and they are some of the greatest freestylers we've ever seen in the game of hip hop. Um, really started to form and develop themselves. And then, last but not least, when we got to high school, um, Opio became part of the equation, and A plus was the one I think kind of brought him in. So that became the foursome, and the foursome that we know today and we hold in tremendous regard in terms of their skill level, their lyricism. But I think when we talk about, you know, this album 93 till infinity, I think, one of the backbones or, key pieces is that it doesn't sound like any other West Coast G Funk album. Now, don't get me wrong. There definitely is a funk element. There's a jazz element, but it just definitely does not sound like anything that was coming out of NWA or Too Short, which is kind of the godfather of the Bay Area sound. But we definitely feel totally different about this album in particular and how it sounded. Yes, we got Far Side, I think a year before that. And that sounded different, but nothing sounds like 93 till infinity. You couldn't like it didn't sound like an East Coast album. We didn't really hear what the South and what the South would truly evolve into, both from the Atlanta side and then obviously from the New Orleans side, as we got Cash Money, and then previous to that, what we got out of the Dungeon Family and Outcasts. But Souls of Mischief sounds nothing like any other group, and that's what really makes them special. So if you call the brainchild of Souls of Mischief A plus, because of his, I guess, dexterity, not only just to be an MC and a ferocious MC at that, but he was also heavily involved in what the production sounded like. So we had Casual and J Biz and many others. Obviously, Dell had a huge part into what some of the songs sounded like, and I think most notably we had "Make Your Mind Up," which is like my favorite song from the album. But they had such a unique sound. But I think the combination of the artists and you see Tajay, and Tajay is the most energetic out of the group. And then you flip over and then you hear Festo, you hear like the level of dexterity and intelligence that he rhymed with. Not saying Tajay is not intelligent, because Tajay is easily, you know, could have been could have got a master's, could have done so many things, but how he combined his lyricism and his body language and his expression into how he rhymes. I think, then you hear like the constant being Opio, and that was one of the ones that, didn't sound like any of the other three guys. And then, you throw in then obviously A plus that was behind the boards, but also on the mic as an MC, and it was kind of the one that helped to level set everything. This is such a special project. And you think of obviously the song and the group title 93 till infinity. And I think that just the title alone and how unique and how groundbreaking the sound of that particular song, it's one of the greatest hip hop songs we've ever heard. It is timeless. It is classic. You could play it 20 years from now and it probably sound like it just came out. So that in terms of the lyricism, the sonic sound of that song is second to none. And you always will remember the time that you heard it. I'm in my last year of high school and I hear that song. And then it's like, who are these guys? What are they about? Where are they from? I don't know anything about them, but what they have meant to the Bay, what they have meant to West Coast hip hop, and not pigeonholing West Coast hip hop to sound only a certain way is totally incredible. You think of Domino, who played a huge impact in also the production of the album. But the sad thing about the whole signing of Souls of Mischief by Jive Records is that everything went south. And I saw it in the documentary when I watched it, that things went south after the first album. They wanted it to sound a certain way. They wanted to be commercial. And this is like the power of, I guess you would say, the record industry and how it really impacts what happened with groups. Souls of Mischief, power to them, and they signed an incredible deal, getting all of their publishing, which never happened with any other group. And that really led to them having power over the greatest song they've ever made, in being 93 Till Infinity. But at the same time, it led to them, after the 1 year, and ultimately them not being with Jive come 1995, after No Man's Land comes out, and they go their separate way. But then they ultimately build a self-sustaining empire on their own. Merchandise like I'm wearing, huge fan. Been wearing the hat for from time. Follow the three dots, the third eye vision, which ended up becoming the name of the first Hiero album. We think about, even the roots, and how, like, the first time anyone really heard them was on Burnt. No different than like Alcoholics getting put on like on a King T joint. So I think, them being able to build an empire, that they've been able to control everything that they've done, and how they've continued their legacy 30 years later. I know you see the documentary, it's 20 years, and they got all these amazing artists from the East, from the South, from any part of the United States, saluting and giving props to Souls of Mischief crew. But now it's 30 years, and now they're doing a tour, and it's so amazing that their stop is actually in Toronto, Canada. The first one sold out. So excited that they added a second date, which is tonight. So Souls of Mischief, the group, and what they mean to me, and what they mean to so many people in hip hop culture, is pretty amazing. So, in just even hearing, you know, just some of the stories, whether it's, Dell battling with Casual, and ultimately, at elementary school, they really didn't end up being a battle, but it ultimately became a collaboration of mind. And kind of, you think of Hiero like forming like Voltron. Those are two important pieces that kind of came together, and instead of being arch enemies, they became allies and really came together. Um, I think of, you know, even the history of like colored tapes. And I never got this album on tape. I got a dub, and then eventually I end up buying the CD. So I kind of miss what the whole tape looked like. This is one of the first colored tapes outside. I remember having like Bobby Brown, which is white, but most other tapes were black. Like, I think the first one I ever got was like Paid in Full back in the 80s. But then this tape was blue. And I know it's not the most revered tape, because when we talk about a colored tape, uh, we talk about the purple tape, which is Raekwon's joint, only built for Cuban links. And then you think of Redman's second album, which was red, which is, the Dark Side album, which was so crazy, that was a red tape. But their album was blue. And that made it really unique. And now I actually want to go hunt and see if I can find this blue tape. I still rock a tape every once in a while at home. So I think it's really amazing to see those things, and what the things that they have done. And then obviously one of the underground joints that they have that many people don't even know about, is the song Taxi, or Cab Fare, where they took the theme song from the show Taxi and flipped the beat, and then they rapped over it. And it's like, I'm probably gonna have to play it a few more times today. But it's absolutely incredible. It sounds so dope. And it is a well revered, and call it a cult classic for those that are Souls of Mischief fans. So I would tell you, if you start to break down the album, and then start from the beginning, and we'll work our way through as we wrap up. But let them know. I think to hear how that song, I still remember. I was at a friend's house, and he put it on. It's like, you ever heard of these Souls of Mischief guys? And it's like, no. Well, Dell. And it's like, yeah. they're the cats that were on Burn. It's like, okay, they pretty fire, but they're doing their own album. Okay, let's hear it. Let's see what they got. Because if Dell gets behind it, then this probably could be pretty good. Let me tell you, my mind was blown after the very first song. Let them know, and like I think always when you construct an album, I've never constructed an album, but I think when you construct an album, you got to start with some heat right off the top. And wow, did they come out like gangbusters when you hear "Let Them Know"? Um, Absolutely amazing four verses from each of the members, and my mind was just totally blown on how they sounded. And I'm sure you heard it's probably playing a little bit in the background right now. But absolutely amazing in how they sounded. And then I think as you start to work through some of the songs that are on the album, and I'm gonna actually just look at it really quickly in order. Um, so I think of my favorite song, as I said, is none other, and it's deep into the album, so you really have to like listen for it. Um, but is Make Your Mind Up, and it's just how the group comes across lyrically. Um, and it's A+ for me in this song. A+ literally spits one of my favorite 16s, and I think arguably one of the best 16s that is revered by hip hop. And I think if you watch the doc, and it was so good to see. And then when they just talk about that song, they don't talk about the creation. They just talk about A+ and his lyrics. And hieroglyphics is gonna twist a kid's about. It's like, what are you talking? How did it's the first time I ever heard someone rap the word cerebellum, and he just goes crazy. But then the compliments of the other artists and in the song, from Tajay to Festo to Opio. And this is one of the early songs that was done, but it stood the test of time and didn't fall off the album. You know, as you work through, and I'm kind of jumping back and forth, but Live and Let Live, definitely a different vibe, but it continues to flow. When You Lost ended up becoming a single, totally amazing song. I think a song that just doesn't get enough credit is This Is How We Do. I love how it sounds. It's a great vibe. Um, then I totally get amped when I hear Never No More. Never No More goes so hard and so crazy. And then obviously I just, 93 Infinity is the crown jewel, arguably one of the best hip hop songs you will ever hear. But then we get into the crew cut. So I told you about Burnt. But then when we get to Limitations and we get Casual and we get Dell, the song just goes crazy. And then I just like how Dell just gets amped, and then obviously finishes out at the end. He just has to give you the big fuck you at the end. It's totally crazy. And then Anything Can Happen, the story that you tell, and you hear, and I think Taji just doesn't get enough credit when he tells a story. It sounds so dope. And then I only learned it in the documentary when they did the song Batting Practice. That's not the original version. That's like the album version. But the cult classic is the one that never made the album. So again, when you say, and then Tell Me the Prophets, I think when you think about the songs that kind of complete the album, just other than songs that just spit fire lyric, the Anything Can Happen and Tell Me Who Profits and Live and Let Live, like these songs, like give you perspective on life, particularly me as a late teenager going into my 20s, trying to figure out my career. Where am I going to go to university and play football? But like these songs help to like really capture like things that I was going through. And this is why this album resonates with me so much, because it was like my life in so many ways. I didn't have the gun violence and some of the other things that they saw, but life things definitely happen. And then, obviously everyone loves the braggadocious song, and I skipped over. It's just track 4. It's like, Call Myself the Man. I never really called myself the man. In my head, sometimes I thought I was the man, but They talk about, what do young men talk about? They talk about women, they talk about this, they talk about that, talk about status. So I think, Call Myself the Man is such a great song. So Souls of Mischief, you guys done an amazing thing with this album, with this cut. I feel so good about it. Always holds a special place in my heart. But thank you for everyone for listening. Again, this will be available on Spotify, YouTube, um, Apple Music, Google. So check out Souls of Mischief, 93 Till Infinity, 93 plus dates that they're doing. You got to check them out. They're in Toronto for 2 days and they hit Montreal. So this is Souls of Mischief Takeover Week in Canada. Big up to Souls of Mischief. Hopefully, I get a chance to see you guys in the flesh, up close, dap you guys up because I have so much respect for you all. Keep doing what you're doing because it is. We talk about hip hop sayings that stick forever. We know Wu-Tang. Wu-Tang is forever. 93 Till Infinity is in the same conversation, probably on par, if not a level higher. So, Hiero, 93 Till Infinity. Thank you for listening to Sneaks, Rhymes, and Life. I'm your host, Lionel McDonald. We out.